Hello and welcome everybody to the Jira and other testing integrations in TestRail webinar. Today we've got Guruk's own lead support engineer Marco Garcia and myself, Simon Knight. So we'll be doing the presenting and the talking. Marco will mainly be doing a live demonstration of those integrations for you, and I'll be hosting and helping out with Q&A and talking a little bit about the TestRail roadmap towards the end of the webinar. We're going to be talking about how you can use TestRail alongside Jira to maximize both the efficiency and the effectiveness of your software testing. We're going to start off by introducing Jira just very quickly for those who maybe aren't so familiar with it. We're going to introduce the notion of TestRail integrations generally, and then we're going to talk about the specifics of TestRail and Jira integration, including how to use our Jira plugin, which you can find in the Atlassian marketplace. After we've done all that, we will have some time, hopefully, for questions and answers, and that'll be your opportunity to address any specific questions that you've got. Just by way of some housekeeping announcements, we'll be keeping everybody on mute throughout the entire webinar. If you've got any questions or comments, please do feel free to share them in the chat room, and we'll pick them up during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We may ask the occasional question ourselves using the polling mechanism, so stay tuned for those. We're aiming to keep the webinar a reasonable length, probably around an hour. We are recording the webinar, and we will make the video available to you all after we've had some time to process it. Just so you know who I am, I'm Simon Knight. I'm the TestRail product manager. If you've got any issues, any questions, suggestions about how we can improve your TestRail experience, please do feel free to reach out to me. Before I became the TestRail product manager, I spent 10 years or so working mainly as an independent software testing consultant, working with teams of all shapes, sizes, and geographies to help them deliver better software faster and with less bugs. Some of you may know me also from my work with the Ministry of Testing, Test Bashes, Dojo, etc. If you want to stay in touch with me, you can do so on the socials or via the Guruk or my own blog. Also with us today, we have Marco Garcia. Marco has worked with us at Guruk for, I don't know, a year, 18 months, is it, Marco?
Yep, about a year and a half.
Okay, great. And to the best of my knowledge, Marco's favorite things are beer, food, and Marvel superhero films. Does that about cover it, Marco?
That pretty much covers it, yep.
Okay, you want to say anything else, or should we get started, Marco?
Sure, I could do a quick intro. So my name is Marco Garcia. I'm a technical product support specialist. I've worked for various software companies over the past years, essentially just mastering and learning various products in their industries and then supporting customers on a technical level. As Simon mentioned, I've been with Guruk for about a year and a half, so there's a good chance that if you send in a technical support request, I was part of that in some manner. But I also worked with Atlassian in the past as a cloud support engineer, previously before coming to Guruk. So I do have a bit of experience on both sides, the Jira side and TestRail side.
Yeah, so we're covering all our bases here, right? We've got a TestRail and an Atlassian expert on the call. Great. All right, well, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So we just wanted to run through a quick introduction to Jira itself. Probably most of you on the call are familiar with Jira, but just really quickly, Marco, what is Jira?
Yeah, so Jira is an agile project management tool that supports any agile methodology like Scrum, a Kanban, or even your own methodology or framework that your team chooses to organize your workflow. It's primarily used for software development, but I've seen it used for all sorts of projects due to its highly customizable workflows, permission schemes, and other functional options that it has. It's pretty complex in the background. In fact, entire careers, products, and industry ecosystem have been created around Jira. One thing that Jira doesn't do well, though, is test case, test execution, or general QA testing management. And this is kind of where TestRail comes in.
Absolutely, yeah. So we can see in this screenshot on the slide here that we've got TestRail, test cases, and results right there in the Jira issue that we're looking at, and that's one of the main benefits of integrating TestRail with Jira, right? Is because you can see your testing in Jira.
Yep, exactly, and it kind of goes two ways too, and we'll get into that here in the demo.
Okay, so yeah. Do you want to walk us through some of the integration stuff then, Marco?
Yeah, so just in general, TestRail has several methods of integrating with third-party tools aside from just Jira. So we have our defects and requirements plugin framework, add-ons like the TestRail for Jira add-on, which we'll go over here in a bit, and also a robust API that allows for custom integrations with essentially any tool. So today we'll mostly cover the Jira integration, as our built-in options for this happen to be our most robust integration at the moment. We're also always on the lookout to upgrading this and other integrations in the future, and I think Simon can speak on that a little more later. In general, though, the Jira integration can work very similarly in other defect and requirement management tools, for example, such as Redmine, Rally, and others. So at least with the defect plugin portions of the demo, you can essentially interchange Jira with almost any other tool, and it'll work very similarly. But first, I'd like to talk about the built-in Jira integration within TestRail.
Okay.
So just as a brief overview, the defect plugin that we have allows you to link your requirements and defects in Jira to test cases and results in TestRail using TestRail's references and defects fields, respectively. So the references field can be found when adding and editing test cases, which you see here. And the defects field can be found when adding and submitting results to a test. The integration also provides a way to look up the current details of each linked reference. So you'll be able to look up these details directly within TestRail without having to leave TestRail. And again, I'll show all of this in real time also with our demo here in a minute. And it queries Jira's API to display these details. So this is always up to date in real time based on what's actually the status or the data entered within Jira at that moment. So yeah, with that, I think I can go ahead and switch over to my screen here and just get started.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. I am pushing the button now, Marco. You should have control. There we go.
Yep. All right. Can you see that well?
I can see that. So everybody should be seeing the TestRail dashboard at this point.
All right, cool. So what I have here, I set up a demo instance of TestRail Cloud as well as a demo instance of Jira Cloud. They both have demo products or projects created with just some dummy data essentially, but you'll be able to get a good idea of how everything works through this. The Jira Cloud, in case you aren't familiar with the most recent updates, they've recently released a UI refresh to Jira, so it may look slightly different if you're using Jira Server still, but the concepts, most of the UI is the same aside from primarily the navigation aspect of it. So I haven't set up the integration at all yet on these demo instances, and I'm going to go ahead and go through that now, just from start to finish, essentially. So in order to link your Jira instance to TestRail, you need to configure the integration in the administration area. That would be here at the top right. We go down to integration in the side view, and you'll see here that this is where you would set up any integration. We have several different integration methods here. Here you'll have the defect view and add URL integration. This essentially doesn't, these two don't require direct connection to TestRail. It's essentially just a format that you would use to quickly link to your Jira instance or any other tool that you're using. So essentially this populates various areas throughout TestRail with a link to quickly jump over to a specific issue ID or similar in your third-party tool. So both the defects and references tabs here will have this view and add URLs, and these don't require direct connection for that. The defect plugin, this does require direct connection. So you'll see here we have some tools or some defect plugins that we've already created and added into TestRail. You'll see a pretty big list here. We're going to be going with Jira for ours, and I'll show you how to connect that here in a second. But this does require direct connection to your Jira instance because TestRail needs to query Jira directly via the Jira API, and without that connection, then you'll start to run into some issues, essentially displaying some of that data. So
that's going to be particularly relevant for folk that are hosting their own instance of Jira, right? On their own server.
Yeah, so it's both with TestRail Cloud and TestRail Server, as well as Jira Cloud and Jira Server. So the integration is, it can work with either combination. So TestRail Server with Jira Cloud or vice versa, and all that needs to happen is a direct connection. So for example, if you're on your own Jira server and you're using TestRail Cloud, you just need to open up connections to your Jira server so that TestRail can connect. Essentially, a lot of times you may have to ask your IT team, but you just need to make sure that TestRail can connect to Jira and the integration will work. There's various areas.
A proxy or a firewall or something like that, you're going to need to make some arrangements.
Exactly. You need to whitelist our IP range, and you can just contact us directly. If that's the case, contact@guroc.com, and we would give you that IP range, and it sometimes changes depending on our cloud infrastructure. So if you run into any issues, typically you would see a 502 error or something similar, which is one of the more common errors that we see. But you would see that, and you could contact us, and we can make sure you're whitelisting the correct IP address. So we do have various documentation as well for setting up different integrations. You can actually see the Learn More button here. It takes you directly to our integration. It's the installation page. There's how-tos for pretty much any tool. It's a very good reference to go by. We're going to be setting up today with Jira Cloud, so I'll kind of go through this and set this up, and then we'll go from there. So
okay, cool.
Let me go ahead and get back to this. I'm going to have to disable this really quickly before starting.
Just while Marco's doing that, just a reminder to folk: if you've got questions or issues, feel free to post them in the chat room in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll try to get around to answering those at the end.
Cool. So yeah, the easiest way to set up the integration is through this Configure Jira Integration button here at the top. It has a very simple form. You just put in your base Jira address. So I'm going to hop over to my demo instance and grab that. For cloud, Jira Cloud, it's usually the same. It's your hostname.atlassian.net. But if you have a Jira server, then you may have some custom address here, such as, you know, jira.mycompany.net or mycompany.net/Jira. Whatever your base address is for Jira is what you want to enter here. A lot of the times, one of the bigger mistakes that we see, or the mistake we see most often, is whenever you go to Jira, you get this secure dashboard section of the URL, and we see people just copy and paste that and include that here, and that won't work because that's just a general page in Jira, and it's not the base address. So we essentially just need the base address here. And so I'll set that up, I'll put that here, and then you'll choose your Jira version. Most everybody is on 5.x or later now, or Jira Cloud, so you would use this. There is support for legacy if you're still on an older Jira version. We'll go through mainly just the REST version, the Jira Cloud integration here. You'll need to enter your Jira user. For demo purposes, mine is admin, and then your Jira password. These are required fields. One error that we see, or issue that we see often, is that customers will enter an email address here, and this form doesn't actually support email addresses at the moment, although we're looking to update that. In the past, Jira, especially Jira Cloud, would always make a regular Jira username without an email address, but we know that Atlassian has been adding various new identity features that allow support for accessing the API via an email address. So we're looking into updating that. This validation form doesn't actually make any direct connection once you submit it. So it's just populating the data here into the actual form. And so even if you do have an email address, you can submit the form, it'll update, and then you can change this later to an email address if you need to. So that's just one of the issues that we see most often. But if you look into your user management in Jira, you'll be able to see whether your instance is using Jira users or email addresses, and that'll let you know what to enter here. And so you have the setup here. It automatically populates, as you saw, these fields whenever I submit that. And you'll have the defects plugin as well as the references plugin. The references, these are basically just different fields within TestRail that use this integration, and I'll show you how those work here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and save this now so I can get to those. One thing that we do also have that I wanted to point out is the enter a template feature. So this is the data that gets pushed directly into a Jira issue description whenever you are pushing a defect with the push feature. So if any details that you want, you would want to include those here. We have a little variable system. You just click add field if you want to add a specific field. For example, a lot of teams like to include the steps within the Jira description so that their developers can see all the steps that it took to perform that test case. So this is really popular. It doesn't require any kind of TestRail access, and Jira users can see that directly within the issue description. So this is popular. You can also...
Marco, we're getting one or two questions coming through, and it seems relevant to sort of ask them at this point. So
sure. One
of the questions in particular, is it possible to see images that have been attached to the test cases or defects that are being reported in TestRail in Jira?
Yes, it is possible with the add-on. I'll show that here a little bit later, but essentially with the add-on you can do that. When pushing data directly to Jira, the attachments don't get pushed into Jira as an attachment to the Jira issue, but you'd still be able to see that directly with the add-on. So okay. I'll show that and how you'd be able to see that here in a little bit when I get to the add-on.
Great.
Cool.
And there's another question around, can only one Jira reference be entered in the reference field of a test case?
No, the references field supports multiple Jira issues. It has a 250 character limit at the moment, but you can enter as many as you want up to that limit, just separated by commas. So that's definitely possible, and I could show that here in a second as well.
Cool.
So most people would just use this configure Jira integration button to set this up because it's quick and easy. You just put in your address and then go. There may be a scenario where this format doesn't work. There's tons of different customization options for Jira, so we know that people have tons of different setups and various different plugins and add-ons in Jira that could potentially conflict with something. So if you do, feel free to contact us and we can guide you in what best to put here if you run into any issues. The most common issues we see are the ones that I've mentioned before, where there's a connection issue or perhaps a username password issue due to the different identity options that Atlassian provides now. But the errors are pretty generic. However, we've run into them so many times here on our end that we know essentially what changes need to be made in order to get this to work. So just feel free to contact us if you run into anything specific when setting this up. And you do have the option to customize the field set here for what you want to have pushed into Jira whenever you're pushing defects. So, for example, if I don't want the priority or assignee fields to be sent over, then I can just disable these here by changing that to off. We'll leave them on for now, but that's just some options you have here for customizing fields. This is only really available for the Jira plugin at the moment, and so not the other integrations you see here, but we plan to look into that in the future as well. And then this also supports creating custom fields as well. So we have a custom field syntax that gets to be a little bit more complex and unique per use case, depending on the type of field and that sort of thing. So usually we do have in the documentation how to set up custom fields, but if you run into any specific issues, it's usually best to troubleshoot that one-on-one, depending on how your custom field has been set up in Jira. So just know that it can support custom fields, and if you run into any issues outside of our documentation, just feel free to send us an email and we can help out with that. I'm going to leave this all to the default configuration for now, and then save that. And go ahead and run into our sample project here. You'll see there's a references column here just when looking at the test cases tab, your test case repository. You'll have these here. If there's no data for that specific reference ID, you'll see that here. If it's something that does have data, it'll query that directly from Jira. This is sample data, so a lot of it doesn't make much sense, but this is querying my sample Jira instance in real time and telling you what project this is, the issue ID, the summary of that issue, the description, the current status and priority. So you'll be able to see all of this just directly with the lookup feature. When creating a test case, you can either enter an existing issue ID here or two. You can also, if you notice that you don't have one that matches this test case that you're about to create, you can add. That'll take you directly to Jira and essentially to your create issue form. And you can go through and create a new Jira issue and make that here, submit that, and just bring the issue ID back over to TestRail and put that in here, and you'll be able to use that here in the references field.
And those references, they could be pointing at different Jira projects, right? So where you've got DH1, you could have TR1 or whatever.
Correct. It'll query Jira that's why we use the base address whenever configuring the integration, so that we can go to any Jira project. So it can work with multiple projects as well.
So there's a question in here. How can we ensure that a defect gets pushed under a specific project in Jira? And that's how, isn't it? Is by, you know, specifying the project reference.
Yeah, well, the references is specifically when you're trying to map requirements, such as, you know, your user stories or your feature requests to a test case. When pushing defects, you have the option to choose, and I'll show you that. So here we're on a test run, and we're going to go into an individual test and add results to that test. And so I'm adding my comment here, version where the issue occurred, assigned to somebody if we need to. And then here you'll be able to see the defects. And so we have the push feature, which connects directly via the API to push the defect to Jira, and then we have the add feature. The add feature, again, this is just the URL endpoint that doesn't really require any integration. It takes you directly to Jira via the issue, create issue form. You click bug if it's a bug, and then go through that form. But most teams would just use the push feature. This is the more robust option. It keeps everything within TestRail, so you don't have to leave TestRail and jump to Jira. So I'll click that. This is the push field. This is all populated from my Jira instance that I've connected already. So it's going to automatically grab the name of this this test case and put it here. It's going to say failed test, because that's usually when you're pushing a defect, when a test has failed. You can certainly change this, but this is just the default that TestRail will pull. And then you get the option here to choose which project to send over to. Now, TestRail will always adhere to Jira's permission schemes. So I would only be able to see the projects that my user has access to in Jira within this list. So I'm not going to see a project that I don't have permission to or don't have access to create issues in. And whenever I choose this project once, and if I'm going to be, usually you're going to be working with the same project more often than not. Whenever you're working on a single TestRail project, usually they usually align. So the TestRail would remember this option the next time, so that I don't have to manually select it. And TestRail remembers this on a per user and per project basis. So a different user won't have to worry about changing this if they're using a different project more regularly. And again, all of this data is pulled from Jira. So the issue type list, if I have a custom issue type in Jira, if I have any kind of customization there, that would be listed here in this as well. Most often you'd be creating a bug whenever you run into a defect. Your component list, if you have components created in Jira, they would be listed here for that project.
So just going back a little bit there, Marco, there was a question here. We use a subtask test issue of story, and we would like to click add to allow us to view this issue type, but cannot see how. So that's the issue type field there that you're referring to. So
correct.
They could add that issue type in there.
Correct. If your Jira project is set up to allow creating issues with that issue type, then TestRail would be able to see that as well. And again, like I mentioned before, there's tons of different customizations that can happen with Jira. So we know that you may not have a completely default configuration. If so, feel free to contact us, and we can check to be sure that this is visible for you and that you're able to see that. But if it's available for this project.
Just saying at this point that we are capturing all of your questions, and you know, obviously there's, as you would imagine, there are some common threads in those questions, and what we'll try to do is address some of those questions in our blog post, which we will follow this up with, and we'll attach the video and try and answer as many of your questions on that in that article as we can.
For sure. And so, but yeah, if it's available in Jira, it would be listed here, and you'd be able to choose that option. If you're not seeing that, then there could be some other either a permissions issue in Jira where your user doesn't have access to that, or some other issue, and it can get granular. So if that's the case, always feel free to contact us, and we can try to work that out for you. So the assignee field, every field that you have enabled is going to pull this data directly from your Jira instance. Priorities, effects versions, these are all being pulled from Jira, all the data from these fields. And then, of course, this is the description. This is going to use the same template that I mentioned originally when configuring this, but if I wanted to add additional details here while I'm pushing that, you can. So this is customizable, but it's going to include the comment. It's going to include the details and the link to this specific test, and then any additional details that you either add manually or through the template. So we'll submit that. This is going to push the issue to Jira in real time. So it just created this. It's going to populate the defects field with this ID automatically for you, so that you don't have to copy and paste it back. And then you would just add the result here. So I can go to Jira and just go directly to the new issue that I created. And this is what was pushed to Jira from TestRail, all without having to leave TestRail. And I mentioned previously that you would want that the integration would adhere to permission schemes in Jira. So just to be perfectly clear, whenever using the configure Jira integration button, it creates these what are called user variables. These are essentially the default users where you see fallback that the integration would use when attempting to either make a connection for the lookup feature or the push feature. We don't actually need the fallback user here, so you can always edit that and take away the fallback user. We typically recommend this if you want to make sure that each of your TestRail users is using their corresponding Jira user. And that way they are essentially forced to set up their Jira user in TestRail in order to not run into issues with permissions and seeing projects that they shouldn't have access to. So if I clear this out, I'm going to run into an error attempting to push or look up any details. So you'll want to make sure that each user goes into their TestRail profile. Here at the top right, My Settings, and then there's a Settings tab. And you'll see your Jira user variables here that were created by the Configure Jira integration button. And you want each user to put in their corresponding credentials within this page. And that way, now I'm connected to my user. I can only see the things that I have access to in Jira, and it makes that a secure connection, essentially, that allows you to kind of sandbox in only what you're supposed to be seeing in Jira. We know that teams use Jira for many different projects, all within the same instance. So that's usually the recommended way to set up the integration. But we do have some teams that prefer to have essentially like a system level user that all TestRail users would submit their defects with. And if that's the case, that's where a fallback user would come in handy. So I just wanted to clarify that just to kind of show you how that works. So okay. We've seen how
there was a question in the chat relating to the TestRail to the Jira password that was being used in that configuration. So and it was in the clear maybe at that point in time. I didn't really see it myself, but it sounds as though the stuff that you described there was the answer to that question, in that you can use those variables to define and hide your Jira password. Is that correct?
Correct. So the variables will be used to hide the password if you're just going to be using a single system level user. They're on that integration page. And then if you're not going to use that fallback user, then you would just use your own Jira username and password within your profile, like I mentioned here on the My Settings tab. There are different integration, there's different SSO integrations and LDAP and other things that Jira supports. Essentially, whatever your Jira API is configured to accept is what you need to use here. So a lot of the times we'll see customers use their email address here because they log in via LDAP, but their Jira API is configured to only work with their Jira user and password instead of their LDAP credentials. So you just need to check with your Jira admin. They'd be able to let you know, yeah, use your username. You can find your username in Jira by going to your profile. That's going to let you know what to use for the API. So it can be different on every instance. You just want to check with your admin.
Marco, just to let you know as well, you've probably got about 15 minutes of demo time left at this point.
We're pretty much finished here on the TestRail side. So I showed you the references field, looking these up here with the lookup feature. That can be looked up pretty much anywhere you see the references or defects field, creating the test cases, using the references field to populate any of your requirements. The test runs and results, when adding results, you'll see the push feature, which is what we use to send this new defect. Again, the defect, I'll be able to hover over that as well to look at the details for that, to see has this been fixed or not. Just on the general test run level, actually this is on the test run, test plan, and milestones level. You'll see these tabs here on the right that have general statistics based on the that specific entity. So with this test run, I have all of these defects which were created in this test run. I'll see all of the defects here. This is querying the Jira in real time, and then also showing the statuses here. So you'll be able to see that here in the defects tab. I also wanted to really quickly go over the coverage for references report. A lot of the teams need to track their traceability. That's what the coverage for references report is used for. I'm just going to create a really quick report that covers all data, just so you can see that. And I'm going to create a second one here in a second, just to show you that. All right, so the first one here, it's going to query all of the references that you've entered in TestRail. All of the test cases that have an ID in their references field are going to be listed here. So if you do just the default report, it's always going to show 100% coverage because it's only querying the test cases that already have something in here. But it's a good way to map which test case here on the right is linked to a reference here on the left. So this is the report you want to use for traceability. Every time you see a reference here, you'll have a line here underneath if this test case here also uses that same one. So DH4 is used through all of these, and so on. The other report that I wanted to show you was the, let's see, which one of these was added first? Okay, so this is the custom one that I created. And this one, essentially, whenever you're configuring the report, you want to put in the full list of all of your requirements in Jira that should have a test case associated to it. So when I was creating this, I added DH500 and DH600, which I know don't exist in my Jira instance, but also that I know it doesn't have a test case associated to it. And so I knew this one did, and these two didn't. This report is going to show you the true coverage whenever you provide your full list of requirements in Jira that should have a test case. You'll see here that it's 33% now. It shows the two that don't have test cases assigned to them, and then the one that does. So I just wanted to show you that report. It's a common question we get about traceability. And now I just want to switch over to the Jira side of things and configure the add-on. So let me go through that really quickly. You'll want to go So I'm in my Jira instance now. This is a Jira Cloud. I'm going to go to the Manage Add-ons page. I haven't actually downloaded this because I wanted to show you what that looks like. But essentially, you go to the marketplace within Jira. You don't even have to go to the website, and you just search for TestRail. You click Install, Accept and Install. Just go through the standard add-on install. The add-on itself is free, so you won't need to pay anything here when setting this up. Very quick, simple installation. And then from here, you'll want to manage that add-on. And so this is all within your add-on administration area within Jira. Once you get to the Manage Add-ons page, you'll click Configure. And this is where you go to set up your integration. This just is similar to our Jira integration. It requires the base address here. So here's the base address for my TestRail Cloud instance. It's going to ask you to generate a key. So I'm going to click that. It's going to take me to Jira, or to my TestRail account. It's going to ask me to generate the key. I'm going to bring that over now and close that, enter that here. So just click the generate key button. It takes you to TestRail, it does everything. You copy and paste that back here. These are various options that you have for the add-on. For example, if people aren't logged on, do you want to show a login button, or do you want to show an empty page? These are just preferences, really. If you don't want the add-on to be visible for users that don't actually use TestRail on your Jira instance, these are where these options would come into play. For example, if I had multiple projects here and I only wanted to limit it to this because I know my testers are only going to use this project, then you can certainly do that. The Jira Server add-on has one slight difference on this page, and I believe I have that opened up here. The Jira Server add-on does allow you to limit via user groups, and so this isn't available via the Jira Cloud API yet. So, but you can do this. So if I wanted to create a testers group in my Jira instance and make sure only those users can see the add-on, then you can do that on the Jira Server version. Not available for TestRail Cloud yet, though. So I'm going to jump back here and save that. And then we'll just go directly to a Jira issue. We know that I believe DH1 has a linked test case already, so we'll go to that. And so here you'll see the majority of the functionality from within the add-on just directly in the Jira issue page. You'll see all your results here in this section, TestRail results, and the linked test cases here in the test cases section. We had a question earlier about a attachment, like a screenshot, if that would be visible in Jira. So it wouldn't be visible as an attachment in Jira, but with the TestRail for Jira add-on, if you expand this here, it shows all of the data for every field that was entered in TestRail. So if there was an attachment here, it would be visible here. I didn't add an attachment to this one. For the sake of time, I probably will skip over that. But if there was an attached, for example, in this comment, if I had attached an image, it would be listed here. So for additional details, we always provide the basic, status. That's usually the most important part. The test name, the status, what happened. But if you wanted to see more details, such as field details, you'd expand that and see that here. You can also add test cases in TestRail directly from Jira. So it's going to ask you what project suite that you want to add that to. It's going to take you quickly to TestRail, populate that references field with the Jira issue ID, and you can create that. It'll automatically link everything. And so if I refresh that here in Jira, I'll now see the new one that I just created. One thing that we get a question about a lot is, how do I add an existing test case to this Jira issue? That is all done on the TestRail side. As I mentioned previously, when you're adding or editing a test case, If you know that this is relevant to a Jira issue, you would just add that ID here. So that's a common question I think that we've had before.
So another common question, Marco, and one that we've been asked a few times in the chat panel is around licensing, and whether you need to have a TestRail user license to be able to see that TestRail information inside of your Jira tickets.
Yes, so anything that's provided by the TestRail add-on requires a license in TestRail to view. And the reason that we do that is mainly for security reasons. For example, there's a lot of secure data in TestRail. You may not want all of your Jira users to see that data. If we provided that access, then everybody would be able to see that. So this also, similar to how our Jira integration in TestRail adheres to Jira permissions, this also adheres to TestRail permissions. So in order to verify that I have access to do this, it checks to be sure that I'm logged into TestRail already and that I have a session open, and then it only provides the data that I'm able to see within TestRail. So to see anything provided by the add-on, then we would have to have a license or a user in TestRail to see this. A couple other features for the integration. These are the bulk of what the features are used for the add-on. But some of the other things, just to show you really quickly.
You got 2 or 3 minutes, Marco.
Yeah, it's just the menu that I'm going to show here. Essentially, this menu might be at the top in your Jira instance if you're using Jira Server or still on the older UI. But essentially, there's buttons either at the top or here on the side. This TestRail button gives you the option to pull up your TestRail dashboard here directly within Jira. So this is the same that you would see in TestRail. You can also go and cycle through specific project dashboards to get really quick summaries and data for your project directly within Jira without having to leave Jira. This also, similar to the other features, requires a license or subscription user within TestRail to see this. You could cycle through your dashboards and that kind of thing. And then if you ever have any questions, these about links also take you to some of the support pages that allow you to quickly integrate. So that's the bulk of the features here. A lot of the times, so just really quick, like we mentioned before, it does require a user to see that. But if you include here in TestRail, in this template that I mentioned previously, if you include all of these fields, for example, you can add results or step results and other different fields.
Yeah, so that was a question that we had as well, Marco, was about sending the steps along with a defect.
Yeah, so that's what this template would be used for. You can use any of these fields. This also supports custom fields that you've created if you've created those in TestRail. So you would definitely be able to send that detail over to Jira. And this sends everything directly within the Jira issue description. So if we go back to DH1, just to show you really quickly as an example, all of what's entered here in this template would be pushed into the Jira issue description, and everybody in Jira can see that. So if you don't want to give your developers or other users access to TestRail for any reason, you can still push all of that data directly into the description field, and everybody in Jira can see that. So that's one way to ensure that your developers have and other stakeholders have visibility into that. But most teams would just, in order to get the true robust experience and productivity benefits, you would want to make sure to provide access to TestRail, and most of our teams do, or our customers do, just because you can see all this extra detail. It's so helpful for developers. Even if they're not going to jump to TestRail directly, they would be able to see this really quickly. All of these links also, if you wanted to see more details, take you to their corresponding page in TestRail. So you can click on these really quickly, opens up a new tab, and you'll be able to see all these details. So these buttons here are just some filters. So if I created a defect when working with a test, then all the results for on the test level would be here. All of the results for the case level would be here. For example, any result for these that are linked here on the case level. But most teams just have all results just to see all of the relevant recent results filtered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Marco, I know that you can talk about TestRail and Jira all day long, but we are starting to run a little bit short of time. So do you want to just wrap it up with some quick closing comments?
Yeah, I mean that was the bulk of the features there. As I've mentioned before, we know that for example, even Atlassian provides 2 different UIs at the moment, but perhaps you have your own customizations. We know that for every team it's different, and that's what the support team's here for. If you have any questions, if you run into any specific errors, please contact us and let us know, and we can guide you through that. We have a specific set of steps for most issues now that we can use to troubleshoot any issue that you run into.
All right, awesome. And what's the best way for people to contact you, Marco?
That's contact@gurok.com. All support questions go through our support system there.
All right, that number again, people, contact@gurok.com, and you'll get through to Marco and the support team, and they are more than happy to help you troubleshoot your TestRail integration and Jira plugin issues. Marco, can you transfer control back to me?
Will do.
Thank you very much, Marco. Just while we're doing that, just a reminder for folk that the webinar is being recorded. So if you felt like things were moving a little bit too fast, we will be making the recording available to you, and you can sit and watch it again. Likewise with all of the questions, we've tried to address as many as we can as we've been going along. But as I mentioned before, when we share the video, we'll do it along with a blog post, and we'll try and answer some of those questions and provide you with the relevant links to documentation and some of the other support videos that we've got along with that. So, you know, don't worry, we're not going to leave you ill-equipped to follow through on some of the stuff that we've talked about today. So in terms of questions, like I mentioned, we've tried to answer a lot of them as we've been going along. There are 1 or 2 others, so we'll take a couple of minutes just to try and address those. So we've talked about the licensing side of things. There's a question here about viewing reports in Jira Dashboard or Confluence. Would we need to purchase an iframe add-on? I don't think there's any need to do that, is there, Marco?
No, you shouldn't need any add-ons in Jira to be able to provide that. If you're getting some kind of iframe error, it could be something that's like a security setting that you may have either on your browser and your Jira instance. And if so, if you're seeing any errors, contact us. It would just use the standard HTML macros that come with Jira for the dashboard features. And with Jira, you don't need any add-ons aside from the TestRail for Jira add-on to actually see the data.
Okay, and there was another question in terms of integrating with other tools. I don't think the question was particularly specific, but I guess sort of requirements tools and things like that. And that is possible using the same kind of mechanisms that you talked about for the Jira integration, isn't it? So you should be able to reference, for example, requirement IDs and things like that from within other tools through the TestRail integration.
Correct. So we didn't have enough time to go over the specific with customizing integrations, but you can also build your own custom defect plugins and references plugin. The documentation is available on our website on how to do that. It does take a little bit of development experience to get that going, but you can build with any tool as long as that tool has an API. I kind of briefly touched on that earlier. And then as far as the other integration, if you just want to use the add view URL integration, that would work with any tool, even if it's something that doesn't have an API, because it's just using a URL structure to access that. So essentially, any tool can be integrated as long as it has a standardized URL structure, and most tools do these days. So
sure. All right, so I think we've more or less covered everything that we wanted to in this webinar. Please do keep sending us your questions, and we're seeing this as like webinar one in a series of TestRail product-based webinars. So if you've got specific questions that you want answered, or some specific themes maybe that you'd like us to cover off in future webinars, then please do feel free to send us your suggestions, and we will certainly try and follow up with more information in future webinars. One of the questions that historically we've gotten asked about a lot, certainly on the forums and often via support tickets, is what's happening in the future. What are your plans for TestRail over the next 6 months, over the next couple of years? So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about that. One of the things that Marco and his team and some of our engineers have been working on a lot is the TestRail cloud infrastructure. Marco told me earlier today that that's about 95% complete now. Marco, do you want to say anything more about that?
Yeah, so we've been working to upgrade the cloud infrastructure, and it's an ongoing project. There's been migrations, all other things in the background. We'll provide a blog post soon with more details on that, but that's something we've been working on for the past few months, and it's going to help speed up TestRail cloud instances and other various features that TestRail would use. So that's been a big project we've been working on recently.
Yeah. And so with regards to the rest of the stuff that you can see here, as you might imagine, some of the items are still in the very early stages of being designed and developed. So I can only really give you a very high level view of some of the future release themes. But if we start from the top, so TestRail 5.4.1, obviously we already released that in January. And that was just a few minor updates, really. And the intention there was just to kind of prove out the new development pipeline that we spent quite a bit of 2017 setting up, making sure that we'd got the right tools, the right people, the right processes in place. Subsequent to that, we started working on a command line tool, kind of a TestRail peripheral, that's going to make the process of reporting test results into TestRail much easier for teams that don't necessarily want to deal with the sometimes challenging work of implementing our API within their own testing frameworks. So the idea behind that is that you can just call the tool from the command line, hence the working title, and you can pass it a set of JUnit, Cucumber, or RANRX test results and other test result formats in the future. And the tool is just going to pass those for you and upload them directly into TestRail, creating the test cases if they don't already exist, and a test run and the associated test results as well. That's still under development currently, and we don't have a hard release date for it yet. We may release it separately if we get it done in time, or we may package it up with TestRail 6.0, which we are currently thinking is going to be automation focused, with additional automation integrations like the ability to be able to kick off continuous integration server jobs from within TestRail, thereby giving teams the ability to start automated test runs, for example. And in combination with the command line tool, see the results of those automated tests reported back in real time. We'll also be working on deeper automation integrations with our partner automation provider RANRX, and we'll be looking to make some improvements to the management and reporting of all your automated tests from within TestRail. Prior to that, we've got a couple of smaller releases. TestRail 5.5 is currently under development and includes some more administration changes, password reset, session management, and some UI enhancements, along with the long requested capability to export reports to PDF format. We'll also be providing administrators with the ability to forget users from the TestRail database in order to satisfy GDPR requirements, which I know a lot of you are concerned about. And there's probably going to be a couple of other enhancements with regards to GDPR as well, and we will notify you about those in due course on the blog. A little bit further down the line, we've got TestRail 5.6, and we're mainly expecting to carry out some API enhancements, and we'll probably look at increasing PHP support for some of the more recent 7.1 and 7.2 updates. In parallel with that, and possibly before TestRail 6, we're also looking at some enterprise features, including things like improved single sign-on support for server and cloud TestRail versions, parameterization of variables within test cases and tests, the ability to reuse test steps in cases across suites and projects, improved organization and manipulation of test cases, suites, runs, etc. So, basically better, faster, smoother test management, improved search capabilities, test case version control, more configurable reporting, ad hoc reporting, and hopefully some Jira improvements as well. And I'm sure, having heard all of that, you're as excited for the future of TestRail as I am. But as I mentioned before, if you have any requests, feature suggestions, enhancements, I am very happy to hear from you. And please do feel free to reach out. So that is that. Marco, thanks again for taking us through the TestRail Jira integration and Jira plugin demonstration. I'm sure many of the people who have been on the webinar found it very helpful indeed.
Yep.
If you want to stay in touch with Marco, people can do that via your LinkedIn profile or contact@gurok.com, as we mentioned earlier.
Yep, that's the best place.
Great. And as for me, I'm Simon Knight. You can get in contact with me via the Gurok blog, or find me on the socials, or via my blog. If you want to try out TestRail, if you haven't done so already, you can go and do so via the link at the bottom. That's secure.gurok.com/customers/TestRail/trial. Go and give it a whirl. And in the meantime, if you want some great software testing content, please feel free to go and download our ebook. That's it from us. Thanks again to Marco for speaking today. Thanks, Chris, for doing all the technical support in the background. Thank you, everybody else, for joining the call. Watch out for the blog and video very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.